By far our most successful video to date has to be why basements are rare in Arizona. And we hit on some of the key components such as time, money, the overall complexities that it adds to the build. But I'll be honest, I was a little distraught by some of the comments that talked about a component of greed, or that developers should spend more money to add more basements to the Arizona market. And now living through it, we're about 2.5 months in, and we're getting close to the point where we can actually pour our basement slab. So today I want to talk about the realistic nature of building a basement, the complexities, the time frame, sequencing that it takes to get back to ground level. Let's get to it. So all in all, we're about 12 weeks into our basement build, and we talked about some of the 3 main categories that we want to discuss today, and that's going to be time, money, and complexities. So to cover complexities, what have we actually accomplished in the 12 weeks that has taken to get almost back to our basement slab? Well, we had to excavate to 14 feet 9 inches. After excavating, we had to get our rebar details for our footings. Upon completion of our rebar inspection, we were able to place our footings and continue on with additional rebar cage that runs up the basement wall for structural integrity. After which, our special inspections took place, and we were able to move on to placing all of our form boards that you can see remnants of here on this basement wall. After form boards were placed, we were able to schedule our concrete pour, which allowed us to be able to pour our walls and get those put in place. After which, we had to strip all of our forms and get them off-site so that we can bring in our waterproof details and waterproof company to be able to make sure that we create an impenetrable membrane around the exterior of this basement structure. While we were waterproofing, we were able to get our plumber in place to be able to take care of all of our underground plumbing for the basement level, which includes 2 bathrooms, a washer and a dryer, and a sewage sump that allows us to be able to get that waste up to city sewer level. Upon completion of that, we were able to bring our excavation company back in to be able to take care of all of our drainage details that reside around the property, that essentially act as a large French drain that allows for all water that would reside in the soil to be able to exit the property and get back up to ground level for our drainage. After which, they're now coming in, refilling our basement hole, compacting it with both a rock, dirt, and A, B, C that will be required prior to placing concrete. And that's where we sit today. So as you'll see today, this increases not only the complexity of making sure that all these details are performed accurately and as the engineer and architect had specified, but also the time associated to be able to get to a point where we get back up to ground level, which we're still quite a few weeks away. So what's going to happen over the next couple weeks? Well, once we have our ABC dropped and we have complete compaction, 4.5 inches lower than our finished floor level, we'll bring our concrete company in to be able to take care of our vapor barrier detail to ensure that we're ready to place concrete. We'll also have to take care of our termite treatment prior to placing that concrete. Once we pass that inspection, we'll be able to move forward with getting concrete on schedule, letting it cure for a couple days while we snap lines and get our framing in the basement taken care of. This all has to happen prior to us backfilling. Based on the structural integrity of the walls, we need to have our framing in place first and our floor trusses set in order to be able to backfill so that our excavation company and our grading and drainage company can be able to come back and build the pad for the first level so we can start this process all over again at the main level of the home. So as you can see, there's a lot of complexities and time that goes in to each of the steps to ensure that they're accurately done, because you only have one shot to be able to get what's right underground, and you got to do it right the first time, or it's going to entail a lot of headache for you as the developer and contractor, as well as the future homeowner. So as the old adage goes, time is money, and it couldn't be more true when building a basement. And while I think that it's amazing to be able to have a basement here in Arizona, there's only going to be so many people that are going to be able to afford the luxury of being able to make this come to fruition. In addition to that, we deal with plenty of labor and trade issues here in Arizona, and I've tacked on 3 months to this build just for the basement alone. And most custom homes that we build in the valley, it'd be hard to be able to convince someone to add 3 additional months to what normally is a 12 to 18 month build time frame on a luxury custom home. And I couldn't imagine any developer that would be willing to take on the additional risk to be able to make that happen within a tract home development here in the Valley. With that said, I feel like we've covered the complexities that are associated with the basement as well as the time associated. So now let's get to the cost. So the first cost consideration that we want to talk about is dirt. And the cost of dirt is high here in Arizona, but really anywhere. I think it's one of the biggest underestimated items of construction. Hauling dirt away, bringing dirt to site, and in this case, excavating almost 15 feet down in the ground. Our overall dirt cost associated with this lot is almost $100,000 in being able to move dirt around. In a normal scenario, we usually have to build a dirt pad and do a fair amount of excavation and final grade. However, the cost associated with that is almost a third, somewhere between $25,000 and $30,000 for dirt work on a standard project of this size. So ultimately, we're looking at almost $70,000 to $75,000 extra cost just for the dirt and excavation work alone. Some people might say that sounds absolutely insane. However, it's not just the excavation of that dirt. It's being able to organize it appropriately on the lot, be able to haul it off lot, and one of the most complex portions of being able to take care of this dirt is when we're able to backfill inside the basement so that we get back to floor level, as well as the outside perimeter, which takes time. It takes a soils engineer or geotechnical engineer to come out and do a compaction rating for the lifts to be able to ensure that we don't have the settling occur that could be detrimental to the overall foundation and landscape plan once complete. So we're gonna move off of dirt work for a bit and we're gonna go down in the hole. Let's get to it. So the second cost is gonna be rebar and concrete. In a single level home here in Arizona, we're obviously gonna have costs with rebar and concrete. But with a standard 16-inch footing and usually somewhere between a 24 to 30-inch stem wall to get to finished floor level, the amount of rebar is typically minimal, and the amount of concrete is maximized for not only an efficient build, but also for more cost effectiveness. We get a 16-inch bucket, we dig majority of our footings. We usually have a few spread footings at some key points that have a fair amount of load, usually spanning a large window or door, or an area where there's a huge load point, let's say with the trusses at a girder truss location. But overall, the reality is that the concrete work is minimal in compared to a basement. In this case alone, we have 12.5 feet of stem wall, and that stem wall isn't our standard 6 inches, but it's a combination of 8-inch and 10-inch stem wall for the basement walls to be able to handle the additional load of all the dirt and the recompaction around the basement. In this case, I believe there's probably about 10 to maybe 15 times the amount of rebar associated in these basement walls than what would be found in a standard single level home. And as for the footings, there's portions of this footing that are 2 foot wide instead of the standard 16 inches. And there's other portions that are 5 feet wide, far exceeding that of what would be found on a traditional single level home here in Arizona. Overall, we felt like we got a phenomenal price in the overall concrete package based on the great relationship that we have with our trade partner. But this total amounted almost $75,000 worth of concrete work prior to us even getting to the main level. So the next cost, and what I would consider one of the most important costs associated with a basement build, is gonna be our waterproofing and our drainage details. Now, a lot of people here in Arizona will say, well, it's so dry. I mean, look at this dirt. I mean, is there any moisture even in it? But we do have monsoons, and more importantly, we have to ensure that moisture can't work its way into our concrete details, which essentially act as a sponge, soaking that water up. And as we get further down into the hole, we're gonna have not only our waterproofing detail, which we've covered in our previous videos, that includes an impenetrable elastomeric membrane that's essentially rolled on to the exterior of the basement, as well as a drainage mat, which we use a dimple board application as seen here. But we also have to worry about the French drain system as well. So once that water actually comes down, where is it actually gonna go? So for the waterproofing solution that we have for the exterior basement wall detail, runs about 18 to 20 grand. And then from there, we have to bring in a bunch of additional drainage rock as well as drainage pipes that I'll show you down here. And while waterproofing is super important, it's only half the battle. What do we do to get rid of the water once it runs down the wall of this basement, down this drainage mat? That's where our drainage pipe comes into play. Essentially, we have a French drain that runs the perimeter of our footing detail here at the basement level, and it actually punches through the basement wall into a drainage sump that it pumps that water that resides here after a huge monsoon, or maybe the flood irrigation that's located in this neighborhood, to be able to eject it up to the grading drainage plant and eventually out to the extreme outfall located at the front corner of the lot. But the cost associated with this pipe alone and the drainage for the overall system is about 8 to 10 grand to ensure that this basement will last a lifetime. So now we're back in the basement hole and we're not quite done with cost yet. Let's get to our plumbing details. Well, the plumbing details for this basement run about $15,000 to $20,000 more than the standard house, and that's because we have a fair amount of additional components. Not only do we have 2 bathrooms and a laundry downstairs, which obviously could reside in the single level home, we have a sewage sump as well as a drainage sump pump that need to be put in place to be able to not only take care of appropriate drainage, but appropriate sewage as well. And there's a fair amount of coordination that needs to go on with that. In this case, to make sure that our sewage sump wasn't too deep, we had to do some core cutting through these stem walls to be able to get to the appropriate height after running our underground plumbing. And we're soon going to be to the stage where we have to drop that ABC in. Well, this is going to add a few $1,000s, about $3,500, to be able to get all of the dirt and ABC back down into the hole. So we're going to be paying for additional compaction and the time that it takes to be able to get our excavator to drop that ABC in the hole. And then another 7 to 10 grand that allows us to be able to get our vapor barrier in place that's required for this basement. But hold on one more second, we're not quite done yet. There's a few additional things that we need to talk about. We haven't got to our basement slab, which is another $8,500, which quite frankly, if it was added to additional square footage upstairs, would still be a cost associated with the main level if we had that 1,500 square feet associated in a single level home. The second thing that we need to talk about is the framing details. We have to have some sequencing that goes in place. We have to have multiple trips for our framers to come and frame the basement walls, and associated with the floor joists or floor trusses that wouldn't be present in a single level home. In addition to that, we have our lumber and our framing package for our labor and our crew that's going to be able to execute this down here in the hole. And that's going to add another $20,000 or $30,000 to the overall framing package that's associated for this house. Now, I understand that basements can be done a lot cheaper than this if they aren't including a walkout basement, and if they aren't as intense or as large as this basement is. However, as you can see, the total runs up really quick, and in this case, we're almost up to $250,000 before we could even get back to ground level. So as you can see, there is truly a reason why Arizona basements are so rare, and that couples the complexities it takes to be able to hire an appropriate builder that can be able to manage it from conception to completion, as well as the trade partners that understand the inherent risks associated with a basement, such as the waterproofing and drainage that's required. The time associated, which in this case will be about 3.5 months to get back to ground level, and of course the cost, which in this case is almost $250,000, if not a little bit more once you factor in the project management that takes place day in and day out. We appreciate you following along. We hope that you found this video insightful. And I would love to hear from any GCs that have built basements here in Arizona to be able to understand how you're able to take these complex pieces of architecture and make them a reality for a more cost-effective dollar amount. As always, we'd love to hear from our followers about any questions or concerns they might have about building a basement here in Arizona, either now or in the future. As always, have a great day.